Hello, everyone. It's great to see you guys joining early. So just stay tuned. We will be starting shortly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Data Hour series. We will be starting in 5 minutes. Till then, let's get to know each other. So, we have put up a poll. Kindly please answer those questions in the poll. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We will start the session in 2 to 3 minutes. We just let's wait for some everyone to join in and settle in. Hello and welcome everyone to another session in the Data Hour series. We are thrilled to be here with you this evening for a session full of action-packed learning. I am Anindya, part of the data science team at Analytics Vidya. So for those who have joined us for the first time, a brief introduction to the Data Hour sessions. So the Data Hour is a series of webinars conducted by Analytics Vidya and led by top industry experts. It is a fun way to understand the concepts of data science, data engineering, software engineering, and blockchain from the leading players in the industry. We are hopeful that these sessions are going to be a great source of enrichment and value adding for our community members. Now on to our session today, which is on building Python dashboard using Plotly. In this session, the speaker will demonstrate how you can build a live updating dashboard using Plotly. He will also explain the various features of Plotly Dash using Python. And before we kick things off and I hand it over to a speaker, a quick recap for the housekeeping items. We are recording this session and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. The link will be provided in the chat section. Please use the Q&A section for asking any queries you have or you might have during the session, and we will do our best to answer them as the data hour progresses or at the end. We will also share a feedback poll towards the end, and you all are requested to kindly fill that up before leaving the session. Now on to our speaker. In this session of Data Hour, we have Mr. Madhusudan Anand with us. Madhusudan Anand is the co-founder, data scientist, and CTO at Ambi. He is a passionate problem solver and a customer obsessed product manager with about 17 plus years of total experience in product companies over the last 5.5 years. He has worked with startups having significant experience and interest in scaling products, technology, and operations. He has won 5 national level awards in the startup ecosystem for building products on IoT, ML, and internet and mobile. He has garnered a letter of appreciation for innovation at Adam Technology from the Embassy of Israel. He is currently working on climate change, Earth observation, GIS, and making meaningful analysis of 54 essential climate variables, and is also a part of a research project at NASA Space Early Adopter Program. You can connect with him in LinkedIn. The link will also be there in the chat window. We are also hosting this webinar live in YouTube on our official channel, and the channel link will be also presented in the chat window. You can even follow up from there too. Thank you. Over to you, Madhusudan. The virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible to you all. And also, I would like to apologize for my energy will be a little on the lower side due to a throat. As you can see, I have a swollen throat, and I have some issues with my throat today. But I hope it will hold through this session. So let me share my screen and get right into what we're going to do today. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, your screen is visible.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah, you all know what we're going to work on today. We'll create a Plotly live dashboard. But before that, we will start writing real code, and you follow through the code alongside, or perhaps you could revisit it later also, is fine. But we'll incrementally build on our learning step by step on understanding Plotly's Dash's features, core components, and so on. And then we'll build a few things, and there'll be a couple of exercises for you to try out later at home. There's some prerequisite for this session that I understand or assume that you know the basics of Python. It may not necessarily be a pro programmer, but you at least know the basics of NumPy, pandas, and handling Python, importing libraries, write a few functions or conditional statements. And then we've divided the session into 4 parts. Basically, the first 15 minutes, we develop an understanding of Plotly Dash, its core components, layout, and we try to build a couple of screens on our own. And the second session, we'll build a dashboard to a certain extent. We sort of exploit the basic foundational learnings. And by then, you'd also be able to understand and navigate through the Plotly's dashboards, Plotly Dashes, documentation and other things, and find your way out into writing your own code. And the final 2 sessions will build the real-time dashboard. We could go slightly higher in terms of complexity. There'll be certain things around callbacks and advanced callbacks and certain HTML components that we'll use. We'll use Yahoo Finance's Y Finance Python package. More on that later. And before we dive in, just a couple of other disclaimers that I'd be using PyCharm as text editor. There's also Jupyter Python Dash that if you're used to use it, but I'm not going to cover that. It's there in the documentation. I will point you to the documentation shortly. We'll run into errors. I might make a mistake, or there could be a syntax error. There could be some known mindful errors that I make to point out something, but there could be sometimes that I myself made an error. So help me out there and be patient along with me. I might go fast at certain times and slower at certain periods, depending on what item we want to stress on. But since this is not exactly a training program, but a very fun session that we're going to have, please feel free to revisit the video later on. There is enough talk on the documentation, and all of this code will be available. I'll share the links shortly. Speaking about links, there are a couple of links I would like to show you guys. One is if you Google Plotly Dash like this, you will reach the enterprise Plotly Dash website. And when you go here, you could go to docs and go to Dash open source. Okay, this is one link that you'd be using it, revisiting it often. You kind of have it open every time you're working on it. There's good community, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of examples, a lot of things going on here. And the second thing is going to be this URL. I'll share this with you on chat here. Okay, so this is the place where I would push all the code. And there's one data set that we'll use called World Happiness. I'll share this here, and this is a data set. You could also download it from Kaggle. Not that you have to download it right from here, but I'll share this with everyone here on the chat. So you would need this later. I'll share it again if you have missed it. No worries. So without further ado, let's get started. What is Plotly? Many of you already use Plotly. It's a visualization dashboard, a visualization library. You could create awesome visualizations. But Dash in one word, according to their own definition, I'm not making this up. Dash is like React for Python. It's a framework that gives you the ability to run on top of a web service like Flask which uses a WSGI, which is Web Service Gateway Interface, to run Plotly Dash. So more on this link here. I'll share this. This notebook is already available. But first things first, I assume you all have Python installed. If you're going to be following along with me on the code, make sure you have Python installed, and then open your terminal and do. Let me minimize this and bring my terminal up here. Okay, and yeah, so let me zoom in. I hope this should be visible now. So do a pip install. Hold on, let me adjust. Yeah, so do a pip install dash, and since I've already installed it, it should say, requirement already satisfied. There's also a pip install Jupyter Dash, which I'm not going to cover today. And if you have not done this already, do a pip install Pandas. Right. Once you've done this, open PyCharm. Okay. And I have created a project called Plotly Dash as a folder inside this. And here I'm going to create a new Python file, and I'm going to call it dash example.py. Okay. So I've added my file here. I hope you're all with me so far. So we've installed Python Plotly Dash, and then we have set up the project on PyCharm. And now it's time for us to write some code. And let's create a quick dashboard without too much of code. Okay. So let's import the things that we need. I guess my fonts are too small. Let me see how I can maximize it. So for some reason, it's not increasing my. Hold on. Okay. All right. Is this font visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. All right. So this is, I've gone full screen on the dashboard, I mean, on my PyCharm, and I've created a new file, and now I'm importing. So we need two things to start with, dash and HTML to start with. Okay. So now I use a function called dash everywhere so that I could call its method. So to do that, I would in fact, this is the way recommended by the Plotly Dash, is to create something like this, right? And yeah, so with this, we have created an application app called app. Inside that, all the dashes functions or the inbuilt methods are available for us to access. So with that, let's create the app layout or the dashboard layout. And inside that, we'll set up something called as html.div. So this HTML is something that we've imported. There is an inbuilt HTML package that comes in inside this, inside of Dash, which we could use. And I'm going to call it my awesome dashboard. Okay, so that's it. With this, we'll also enable some debugging. And to do that, I'm going to instantiate with this method. And yeah. And then app.run underscore server. Okay. So with this, and I hit Command S or Control S save, and there is a terminal that I open. Okay, so right here, and just make sure you're running in the same folder as where your project is open, and simply type Python and the file name, which is dash example, hit return. Okay, so it says the dash is running here. So let's go open this link and see what's going on here. And this has just created a environment using Flask app. Flask app is serving the application called Dash example under the app called Dash, right? And Flask is helping us. I'm sure you know a little bit about Flask. Is a it's like Express.js of Node if you're coming from Node background. Helps us run the service. And I'm gonna go to my Chrome now, and let's paste this URL and see what's going on. And as you can see, what we typed here is available. There's this blue icon that you will see to tell us that this is in debug mode, right? And if I change this text here from this one, let's say from this to something like this, and you can see it updating live real time on its own, right? So that's our first layout of the dashboard that we've created. So let's quickly understand what is happening here. To do this, I could straight away explain it to you, but let me show you the dashboard documentation. And when you go to introduction, you can read about it, but go to tutorial and go to the layout part. And here you can read about what exactly is happening with the HTML tag H1. We'll discover a little more of this as we go, but you can see that the component generates the tags. So whatever we have put in our code for HTML is type, we have only set up one element and said on div. We'll add more child elements and other things. But I hope you are able to gather this from your understanding and know that there are different components, and HTML is one such dash component that comes under the module dash.html, which we've imported. And with that, we have created a HTML tag in which we have put simple text just to understand how this works. Okay, so with this, let's move on to sort of add more components into the dashboard. I'm going to stop this by pressing Control Z. Just a moment. Okay, so let's build out a dashboard where we could actually add something useful and important. I have some code that I've written. Let me add it 1 second. All right. Now, within this app layout, I'm going to remove this whole thing. Okay. So let's do something different here. Inside this div, we'll do a H1, and inside that we'll say world happiness dashboard. And then we'll create a paragraph just to see how that works. Okay. And the paragraph is P. There are a lot of other HTML elements. Almost all HTML elements are supported by Plotly Dash. So let's see how this works. All right. And then inside the same paragraph, if I have to add let's add a break, line break, by calling the function called BR. Okay, it's in Python syntax. And A will give us an attribution to add a hyperlink. So I'm going to just say world happiness report data source. And here I will add the href where I could add for the attribution, right? So, oops. I think it's world happiness dot report. Okay. Then the target, let it be blank for now. Okay, we'll come back and add this later because I have to check the URL. All right, so let's save this and run this again. Okay, so we got a first error. It says that there is a error in the in line number 7. So I missed a comma here. Yeah, so that's the syntax error. Then let's run this. So this, I hope you saw how we see the error, right? So let's kill this. That I have a. Okay, so. Okay, now let's run this. Oops. Okay. Yeah, this happens because this is already running and trying to update, right? So let me close this. Okay, and the process is still running. So I'll try to kill it again. Okay, so now I'm going to run Python dash example.py. All right, so this should have now updated to. There you go. So yeah, the title is there now, right? It looks a little better. I'm sure if I zoom it out a little bit, it looks a lot better. Yeah, so we have not done any styling. We've just given it a little bit of look. So we've added an H1 title and a paragraph. So the title, paragraph, and there is a bit of gap here because of the line break that we've added. And then we have a, yeah, so otherwise this whole thing will be jumbled between on top of each other because it follows within the same paragraph. So that's what we've done so far. Moving on, let's now look at some of the core components and add a little bit of complexity to this, where we're actually able to see and interact a little bit. Okay, so there are some core components that I would like to introduce you to. Core components help us bring more interactability with the user within the Plotly dashboard. So for this, you might need to go to the GitHub link that I shared above. Let me share it with you again. And you might need this data set if you're following along with me. So this is the data set. Let me share it with you. You can perhaps clone the dashboard clone the repository and download the code however you please it. Okay, so let's get started with the code. Now, let's add a few more imports, because now we're going to import the data and add it to the to our dashboard, right? So we need to make sure that we have all the imports that are needed. So one of the import is called DCC, which is nothing but dash core components. We'll learn about them in real time. So I'll also import pandas as PD and import plotly.express as px. So this will help us continuously run the visualizations from real-time data. So I'm going to also import the data set just how we import it from any other database. If you're coming from a data science background, you would do a pd.read.csv, right? Something like pd.read_csv. So I'm going to do exactly something similar, but I will assign it to a variable so that I can keep calling it accordingly whenever as needed. So I'll do it like this: happiness pd.read_csv. And I have the file right here within my home folder. You can see it here on my top left-hand side within my project folder. So I'll take that worldhappiness.csv, sorry. Right, so I got my, and usually if there is any error, because we have the debug mode also on, we'd immediately should throw an error. And so far there is not any error. Just a moment, let me move this Zoom thing somewhere. Okay, now what we'll do, we'll get our core components ready. Okay, so we'll bring our core components. I'll put a comma for the app layout. And the first component that we do is called dcc.radio items. This is available in the documentation. This accepts two variables. One is options and second is called value. So this is one of the core components, which is nothing but it accepts either an array or a list of strings, numbers, or booleans. In our case, we could give from our data set. If you've checked out a data set, it's got country names. It's a list of countries and how happy people in those countries are. So we're trying to build this dashboard as an example today. But it could be numbers, it could be anything. So it could be a use case where you're trying to show how many, let's say you're working for Amazon, you want to make a dashboard of how many phone sales are happening. So phone models could be options, and the amount it sold for could be value, right? So there could be additional things wherein you might need a dictionary. For example, you might have a Samsung A1, Samsung A2, Samsung A3 as different models, and Samsung can be the main keyword. And the key could be Samsung, and the value could be its models, and then the revenue could be the value for those properties, right? So that is how this works. And let's add those things, and let's add a few more things along with it. So I'll explain what I mean. When I give the values, you would understand. So if I do options is equal to happiness, oops, and then I would call in the region. So this is how you call a column, right? In a pandas, you would address a column like this. And I would add a unique feature so there is no repetition, right? And sorry. After this, I'll give a value, right? Value, let's say India. You will see in a bit what I mean. Don't worry. If you're not able to understand it, don't worry about it. You will understand what we're doing just about a bit, right? And then I would do another checklist. So radio items are nothing but radio buttons. Checklists are nothing but check boxes. So here I would include the same thing. Okay. And the only thing I would change here is perhaps put this inside offer, because this is going to be a column that is being called. Okay. So we don't have no errors. Let's add one more component just to have fun with this. Let's add a drop down, another core component called drop down. This will bring a drop down menu. And inside that, if I want to list out all the columns that are there in my, all the countries columns, right? So if you take a look at the data set, I don't have the time to share, take a look at the data set, but feel free to look into it. But you will see in a bit. Then I would add country and unique countries to be listed on the drop down, and the value to be, let's have India by default. Okay. Now let's present the graph also while we are at it. Let's present the graph of how happy people are in India by calling the graph by addressing at figure. We'll do a line graph to start with. And I'm going to take the same parameter, sorry, same file, right? This is the data. Every time I'm writing happiness, it's the data set that I'm addressing. Inside of this, right, I want to extract country. So this is how I call that country. And again, I want to make sure this is unique. Sorry, this is in India, right? I could even set a default to start with and say India. But a graph should also have not just the data set. We should also define the X and Y's, right? So to do that, I'm going to call X as a year. X should be year. Y to be sorry, just grabbing some water. Okay. And Y to be happiness score. And title to be happiness score in India. All right. I hope you're all with me so far. Now, in fact, I could take this whole thing that is there all the way here and cut it. Okay. Go up and assign it to a variable called line underscore figure and put this entire thing right here. Yeah. And take this, just take this. Okay, looks like there is an error because of which my code stopped because I missed to add fig. Okay. Yeah. Now we've added this. Okay. Yeah, looks good to me so far. And we still leave the debug to be true. Okay, let's see what we have. Let me restart this. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and look at what is happening. Okay, there you go. So now we've got this thing added. On top of it, here are our radio buttons, right? Only one gets selected. All the countries that are in my, all the continents, regions that are there, and all the continents, regions are right here. And then the countries' names are here. You can also type, it will, for example, if you want United, it also filters along the way. So I can type whatever country, and let me maximize this window a bit and zoom out. So you can see the graph as well, right? We've straight away created a live dashboard. So I could see Australia, but this is not changing as I'm changing anything, right? The buttons I'm putting, I'm selecting something. Let's say I select Eastern or Latin America or something here, Southern Asia. Nothing is happening here. The data is also not updating because we have set the default hard coded it to India right now. Okay, and we have not done any major changes to the code or anything. We've just set up a basic dashboard. We have not made anything in terms of making it interactive, right? So let's go back to the code and now make it interactive. So I hope you understood a few things here. Let's recap a bit quickly. So now we've got the imports dash HTML and the core components. We imported pandas so that we could write a few pandas functions like unique and to call upon things like country. And this happiness is our code, the data set that we have. And we imported Plotly's express as PX so that we could use the PX to call the graph here inside the line figure that we've added here. Okay, so this is straightforward. If you're coming from Plotly or any visualization, Seaborn or anything, you would set up something like this. Yeah, and we've got dashboard live up and running straight away. So what I'll do, I'm going to make sure I'll do git push right at the end of the day. So you'd have access to the code at all time. So far we've hardly spent a few minutes and we're already into a dashboard. Now let's speed up a little bit. I already see that we have 36 minutes into this session. So let's see how much of this we could cover. So now we want to add something called as, I want to introduce us to a concept called as callbacks, where callbacks are nothing but a user makes an action, the code asks for user input, it takes that user input and gives an output to the user. So there are two components to make callbacks. That is, one of them is input and second one is output, right? And let's just remove all of these extra code that we have. Okay, so let's just remove this whole thing. Okay, so inside this, now let me rewrite a few things. Let me show you what it is. So there should be dcc.input, which takes an input. So if you know a little bit of HTML, you would ID every element in your HTML so that you could call it to the particular, apply to the class of that element, right? So similar things apply here. So you call an ID here, and I would say input text. You'll see in a bit what I mean, right? And then a value. I'll show you what I mean here. Okay. And then type will be text. Here html.div. I'm going to introduce you to a concept called children. We'll come back to this later. So children are nothing but sub components in the HTML hierarchy. Like if you have an unordered list and listed indexes, the listed li will be a part of the ul HTML tag. Okay, so we've added two things. Then let's come back into this later. So I'm going to add something called as app.callback. Oops. Generator called app.callback. I hope you do know what are generators. So it has one output, one input. We always put output first, and then we add the input. So we handle the output first, and then we handle the input according to the rule set by Peppa8 and also by standardized by the Plotly. So we do component ID. Component property. Children. Okay. All right. So now that I've created this, Okay, now let's do a function. So now we have the input. I need to write a function that from which I can take the input and hand it to return an output. That's what a callback does. If you're also from a React environment, you would know what does callbacks do, or from a JavaScript environment. For Python, it's a fairly new concept, but it's very straightforward. So I take the user input and return whatever the output is. So the output will be for the component ID output text. So I'll format it like this. So into text, a text field that is there, and I will put it as input underscore text component, right? So our input underscore text component is here, which is the user input. It takes the user input and then it passes on to its children, where the ID is going to be output text, right? So I hope you're able to follow with me. If you're not, no problem. We're going to quickly show this right here. Okay, we'll see what we've done. So I'm going to save this, and looks like it is, the server is still running. Let's see what has happened here. So you can see that the change this text part, right? The change this values right here. Now, if I take this and sort of type something, it updates here. So this input is taking our callback from me, and it's updating this particular ID of the text that we have right below as output. So this is the input, and this input is being taken and the output is being printed. So this is what callback is. Okay, so let's go back to our original code where we need to sort of bring back to what we had done before. Okay, so okay, so I've got back our code that we had earlier. Okay, you're able to see this, and we're back to this screen. Yeah. So we understand how we could pass along using the output and input. Don't worry, I'll push this file as well on a separate file. You can see the my GitHub updated in the end. Okay, so now let me get some water, guys. Hang on. Okay, so now we need to make this thing as input output and have be able to add callbacks, right? So that I could make this more useful. So to do this, we're going to make a few changes to the code, that the way we've written here. So start with the radio items. We don't need radio items. So I'm going to mark, comment this out, right? Let's have, we don't need checklist as well. Okay, let's have a drop down. Let's say, let's have the user select the country. And based on the country that the user has selected, we populate and update the graph. Okay, so we need to update the graph and the country, okay, based on the user selection. So we'll even comment this out, okay, this out, and we comment this out as well. Okay, so now let's write the code. Okay, I'm going to give it a new ID, and inside this options, and the option should be the data set. we want to user to select the country. So select the country. There are some repeated country names in the data set. So I'm given. All right. So we've got this, and we don't have. Okay, so let's do this something different here for the graph. Okay. So we'll give a graph also an ID, happiness graph. And we'll establish a figure that could be randomly updated, right? So we don't want to hard code it this time. So we will randomly update it. Okay. Now for our callbacks, we have no callbacks in this, right? So let's start the callback generator. The first callback generator will be to update the drop down. So app.callback. Inside that, we do output. Component ID is happiness graph, because that's what we want to output to, right? So first we always remember, we always do the output. So the user will select India. And what do we need to update? We need to update the graph. So the graph is the output. The input will come back to it. Input up definitely has to be your drop down in ID, but the output has to be your graph ID. So that's why we're putting the graph. So I'm putting this component property as figure. Okay, so right, you can see that right at the top. So I'll say figure. And now input. Input has to be the drop down. So component ID will be country drop down. Is going to be value. Okay, so inside this, there should also be a function that they should be able to do perform. Where the graph should get updated from whatever the user has selected. So the input should for this should be the graph selected by the user, and then filtered out happiness that we'd filter from that. Okay, so now comes the figure. The graph that we want to update will be a line graph. To do that, we'll bring back that code that we commented, but let me rewrite this just so that I make sure I don't. So we have filtered happiness. This is our input where the data that we want is inside. So I'll take that data. Instead of calling this again, I'm going to simply call filtered happiness, which is the data that we want. And from this extract X column year, and then Y column, which is the happiness score. Okay. And what should be the title for this? I could hard code it, but let's make it dynamic based on whatever the user has selected by simply selecting selected country. And then finally return the figure. This is what the code should do now. So I'll do Control S, and there is some syntax error. Oops, there should be figure is equal to. Okay, let's see if I can run this. So the figure at the bottom should be able to update it. Component property. Okay. There was a typo. Cool. So let's go see what we've done so far. All right. There is a callback error updating. Okay, we'll fix this. See, this is selected country is not defined. Right. So we'll go fix that and then come back. This is what happens when you're in debug mode. So this is where it is not defined. Okay, so now nothing is changed, done yet. I think that callback is not fixed yet. So it is select country, so it's selected country. Thanks, somebody found the error. Great job. So now this should update. Okay. There's still something. There is still something. The issue. There's an issue. So there is selected country here. There is selected country here. Where do you think the problem is? Correct. It should be selected country. Perfect. Thank you. So now this will update, and we got a graph back. Glad to see you all attentive. Thank you. Um, so we've got this back and running. So this is as simple, right? It's pretty simple that we've got this callback function running, and we've got this. So we could add a few things where we could chain the callbacks. We could add uh, a submit button and everything. So I'd update that code and push it to the Git. But let me quickly also show you the code for. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit, and I want to show you the code of what we will finally would be built, and go through the code, and we should wrap the session by then. So you'd be able to have enough things to take it from there. So I'm going to just take about 2 minutes and to show you the final dashboard that we'd be building and how are we building. What we saw right now has just been the basics of what we want to do. Give me 1 minute, guys.
Hello everyone. Until Madhusudan shows the dashboard, I will be like uploading a poll here, the feedback poll. Kindly please start filling the feedback poll.
Right, I'm gonna share my screen now. So I have added a new code and we'll go through which very shortly. And I just want to show you what we've done. So this is the dashboard that we'll be building. So let's say I would do app, Apple. So this is a financial dashboard, which is using Yahoo Finance. And let me show you. This is the Yahoo Finance package. Okay, so I've used Y Finance package. If you simply import this, it will give you something like this. Okay, I hope that should be visible. This is expired, so. And I will not spend more time on this, but this is Yahoo Finance's. Somebody has written a module which scrapes Yahoo Finance APIs and brings about latest data. And this is the ticker, which is a short form for it. And using this package, you can see this is the data. It has date, time, open, high, low, and volume that is there. And this is updating very regularly. You can see every 15 minutes it's getting updated. So what we've
Hello,
done, sorry.
Madhusudan. We are not able to see the screen. Like we are getting a different tab here out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is my screen visible now?
Yeah, it's visible now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm using Yahoo Finance. So you do a pip install finance in your terminal or command prompt, and then this is how the data looks if you import Yahoo Finance as YF and add a ticker and call Apple or any other stock market. This directly gets US stock market, and it I put period of 2 days. You could change it to 1 day. Somebody has written a module that uses beautiful swoop and other things and scrapes the data off and brings us directly. So if I run it for 1 day, from all the way from opening at 9:30 it opens until 4 o'clock. There are 15-minute intervals of data that are being added here. Volumes of people, how many people buying and selling has happened, and at what time it opened at 1:48. It reached a high of 149.5 at 9:30, and it reached a low of 148.7. At 9:30 closing, it was 149. Right. So people, most of them bought early in the morning, visually inspecting, I can say, then nobody bought when it was closing. Right. So we use this package into our data. This is a live package. It updates every time we make a call to this. It sends us the data accordingly. So we've taken this data and we have built a dashboard like this. So I could use any of the tickers that is there for even things like US Bitcoin. Bitcoin updates every 5 minutes. So you could throttle with a lot of this. But let's go take a look at the code. I don't have the time to type the whole code, but with whatever we've understood, established understanding so far with how our code is right now and how to make a callback, we're able to understand let's say BTC USD, let's see, and I type this, and this is the input, and the submit button controls the state. So the third thing that I wanted to introduce you to is called state. So there's input, output, and state. So this state controls moment I gave input when you saw in the previous thing and we had a text field. Moment I typed, it was updating at the bottom, but this time it doesn't. It waits from the user to click on submit. Upon submitting, it sends the output to the function that is going to run the Y Finance and fetches this data. And then we've added a data column as table as well, where the same data set that we have here, right? The same data set is printed. Oops, I'm sorry. It's printed right here, right? At this is getting updated much more frequently because I've gone from more than 15 minutes to even 2 minutes. So let's take a look at what's happening in the code here. Okay, so let's start right at the top, and I'm sure you would understand by now how easy, how simple this is. So all our imports are right here. We have to do a pip install Y Finance and then import the Y Finance here and initiate the application so that we could use the dashes functions inbuilt methods here. The first things first, we create the layout in HTML. Inside the layout, if you take a look at the layout, what do we have? We have a header, then we have a input text field, we have a button, and we have two tab. So there are concepts called tabs and tab in Plotly Dash. Tabs are multiple tabs grouped in, and tab is a single tab. So these two tabs make a form a part of in the hierarchy called tabs. Okay, so it's as simple, very straightforward, nothing great in that, right? And then we have these tabs, and below one of them tab has chart, one other tab has a table, right? And that's about it. Very simple. We have not done anything much, but this updates every real time. So if you wait for a few minutes and you can see, okay, of course, I think the market is not open yet. But it's 2:30 p.m., right? It should be open now. So it should refresh on its own automatically, and it should update in a minute. I set it up for 1 minute. We'll come back to this page. It's 2:30 p.m. Remember, it's 2:30 p.m. It's updated. So let's come back and see if this is updating. Okay. So those are our layouts, right? So one input, one state button, submit, and it takes the output, which is the two tabs, right? So that's what we need. So what are those things? So input, right? I've given a name to the ID to it, and given a placeholder. If you remove this, right, this is the search for symbols from Yahoo Finance. This is where it's coming from. And I've done a bit of styling, to adjust a bit of the look and feel of it. And then we have the button. Again, ID, the reason we give ID so that I could call that button later on and pass a function to it or return an object to that particular button. And the children is the submit button, which is, of course, the child for that button is the text that's written on it. Two line breaks, and this is the tabs that I said. I've created a tabs. Inside that tabs, I could create as many tabs component. I could create as many tab as needed. So the first tab is the chart, obviously, given it an ID called graph, stock graph for the children. And then the second tab is the table, obviously, so that it I've created another section separately, right? And inside that, we have this data, stock data that's coming. And in that, there's a latest price div that I've given it a name so I could identify that way and I can call it later. The next thing is these things should update on its own, right? So I added an ID called chart interval. And every time I add that, there's an interval and n interval. N interval is the counter, the number of times this is refreshed, right? And I've added to 15 minutes, right? 1 milliseconds, 1000 milliseconds into 60, and then 15. So the chart will get updated every 15 minutes, but the data will get updated every minute. Okay, are you guys so far with me? Let's see. I should not have removed it, but let me add it back. And okay, it's 2:32. Let's come back and revisit this and see it automatically should refresh. Then comes the callback. So we have one output here and one output here. Yeah. Okay, look, there you go. It became 2:33 already. So it's updating automatically. So you have one output here, one output here. And we have taken the input here, and then the submit is another action input, then input should get passed on. So clearly, I need um, to update the graph. So we write the output always first, like I said, and we update the figure, we generate the figure. And then we need to receive the input from the submit button. Then n clicks. N clicks is coming from the interval that we have set, and n interval, I'm sorry, for the chart interval. And then the state that controls the button, the ticker input for the submit button we have. Okay. So where this we'll use it here in the later on the submit button. I'll come to that later. So this is the first callback that we have. Now to update the chart, we update the chart where we take the three input that is there, and we update the ticker is also an input, right? So the button click when the user hits submit, and the interval, chart interval, and the ticker. So a little bit of error handling I've done because I kind of know, sometimes it, even though you type the right ticker, it returns a wrong value sometimes. And I know that, so users can type anything. So to make sure there is some error handling, I've done some basic cleaning. And one day's data should be getting displayed when the user hits submit. And I want you to, for the figure, include all of this data. The next one is to update the table, the second tab that we have. So now that we've done with the graph, similar arrangement to update the table. So the table will need the submit button again. We'll need the table interval input for controlling the state when the user hits submit. Similar conditional statements, you can call it error handling, exception handling, but basically, it's just submitting, giving me some data. Where I am taking the latest price, and then I am taking the price. All of this you could trial and error it, keep doing it. I've just done it because I started working on this today, and I thought I could add this. This is the max latest data, because max will bring me the latest data, and then it will read about strf time in Python. This is a very straightforward thing. Go to Python documentation, read about strf time, and then it returns in the format, text format. I've dynamically made the price and latest time and records. Then if there is no data, so say that ticker, there is no data, return that. Sometimes user writes anything and there is no data, return this message. That's about it. I've kept the debug option running, and we've populated this. So if you see Dell, for example, and it updates. And this is the candlestick chart that we've updated. We got it here, and this is the latest data. So that's about it, what we have done. So I will push all of this data to my Git here. This is the URL. You will see the fully updated table where we built using happiness dashboard, as well as this live data. I will update it here. Instead of typing this code, I've been able to show you the exact thing. So it's all about how we handle callbacks and set up everything. There's a lot of HTML handling that you could do. I don't have the time to do things like make it even more good looking, or add bootstrap, or make it cooler, removing background, adding navigation, and a whole lot of things, logo and everything. But another time, in an hour, we could build two dashboards. One of them is live, that is itself a thing. And yeah, again, if I select anything, it displays only that. So let's go back to Apple again and submit. And this is the chart that we selected there in that screen. So select something else, that gets displayed. All right. So that's it from me today. And I'll stop sharing. I'll hand it back to the host. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Madhusudan. On behalf of Analytics Vidya, I would like to thank you for your time and for delivering such a wonderful session. I'm sure our audience have found it insightful, and hopefully we can conduct both such sessions with you in the future. The LinkedIn profile for the speaker, I think we have provided in the chat, and I will upload it again there. And I hope you guys have also filled the feedback poll in the meantime. And if you wish to conduct any webinar or are facing any difficulty in registering, please connect with us at editor@analyticsvidya.com. And the recording of this session will also be available within 2 days on our YouTube channel. We will be back with another session on the data on 4th of Feb. The link will be provided in the chat section. Till then, bye bye. Can keep learning.